Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. So happy to have each and every one of you back today. Super excited about our guest. Today, we've got Dana Skogstad. He is sales director for Travelzoo. Dana, welcome to the show. So excited to have you here.
Hey, thanks, Jason. It's great to be here.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We spoke a few weeks ago, had a really nice conversation. I thought, well, we just need to come back and have a longer conversation, more in depth, and record it for anybody that wants to listen. So I appreciate you coming back. Dana, before we get started, I'm really most interested, and I think our listeners are most interested in your story. You shared a little bit of it when we spoke last time, so we're definitely going to dig into that. But before we do that, let's let our listeners know, like anybody that's thinking, what the heck is Travelzoo? Maybe they've heard of it, maybe they haven't. What is the 30, 60-second elevator pitch on what Travelzoo is?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jason. Honestly, I didn't know much about Travelzoo either before I started working here. And I was a little embarrassed afterwards because there's 1.5 million Canadians that are subscribed to our newsletter north of the border. Means that's about 1 out of every 30 Canadians I know receives our newsletters and is acquainted with some of our cool travel packages. So I had to acquaint myself pretty quickly after that first phone call. But essentially these days we're the club for travel enthusiasts. We've got global reach, and we really focus on putting exciting trips and travel experiences and even some fun local stuff in front of our members, encouraging them to get out there with our unique curatorial angle.
So I got to ask, you mentioned Canada. So I don't want anybody that's listening to this to just check out because they don't live in Canada. But I'm curious, do all of your members live in Canada, or tell me more about that?
No, that's a great question. I mean, Canada's where I'm focused, and it's where I'm sort of living my life day in, day out. But Travelzoo's have got a much larger global reach. There's over 20 million members subscribed to our newsletter across the country, with some of the biggest groups being in the US and also in the UK and Europe.
Good. Well, I'm happy we got that out of the way because I don't want anybody to tune out, think, oh, this Travelzoo thing's a Canada thing. Obviously, it's not. As a sales director, I introduce you as, I don't know, the sales director, a sales director. Tell us more about that. What do you actually do for Travelzoo?
Yeah, I mean, I often think I've got the most fun job at the whole company. I mean, my team is tasked with finding all of the fun and unique travel experiences that we put out on our network. So my days are spent meeting with different lodge or hotel operators across the country, different shows that are doing concerts, different restaurants that are opening. We get an opportunity to connect with those business owners, find out where we can contribute and how we can bring new visitors to their locations. And then we craft business partnerships based on the fruits of those conversations. So it's great. Even just half an hour ago, I was connecting with a really interesting guy in Nova Scotia who's just started a brand new adventure luxury lodge outdoors. And he was telling me about his journey, getting things up and running. And, you get to look at beautiful pictures of these properties. Imagine yourself going with your family. It's a fantastic job.
No, it sounds great. Do you have the opportunity to go kind of do that? I don't know if they call it fam trips, scouting, in-person conversations. You go visit some of these places as well, I take it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, wherever possible, we're trying to get meetings on site with our partners for that exact reason. Whether I'm driving across Vancouver Island to go to Tofino, even if it's a 1-hour meeting, I think it's probably a good idea. I go to that one in person, take a look at the view, check out the hotel. But we also do something really neat at the company, and everybody that works for Travelzoo in any role, whether it's IT, finance, or sales, every employee gets access to what's called the Travelzoo experience, where there's one extra week of vacation available to everybody during the year, and the company will pay you back if you go do one of the trips that are available on our network. So that's definitely gotten a lot of us out there. I used mine to go to Portugal last year, and we had an amazing trip overseas.
Very cool. And I ask questions as they pop into my head. I have no plans, but what I heard you say was they give you an extra week of vacation. And if you go do one of the Travelzoo experiences, they'll reimburse you. And I'm curious, do you have people at Travelzoo that just take the extra week and stay at home? Is that even an option? Do you have to go do something in order to get that extra week?
You know, we might have people that would choose that because we're all avid travelers, and in our spare time, we're all out exploring the world. So I'm sure some people could use a break every once in a while. But no, to qualify for the experience, you've got to go and do something, somewhere on the network. The closest one that I ever did was when I was living in Vancouver. I went to Whistler for like 4 days, and that's what I used the Travelzoo experience for that year. I'd done a lot of other trips, ones that I just kind of planned ad hoc, and I was kind of getting close to the end of the year, and I thought, boy, I better use this or it's going to go away forever. So we booked an amazing 2-level penthouse loft in Whistler, just did it right for a couple days, skied like crazy, and took advantage of the après.
Just submit your receipts when you get back.
Exactly.
Sounds like
that one was a twofer. That was actually a partner I was working with too. So I got to go and have a meeting while I was on the Travelzoo experience and get a full tour of the hotel. It was really awesome.
I hear you justifying the expense.
Just in case anybody's listening,
I know it was a little bit more expensive than normal, but I had some business meetings, and I get that. That's pretty cool. And I love that it's kind of look, if you want to take advantage of this, you got to go somewhere, because I can see some people, they've got families, lives and stuff. And even if they really like to travel, all of a sudden, boom, you've got an extra week of vacation. And they're like, well, I really need to get caught up on stuff around home or whatever. And this kind of really encourages them to actually go do something instead of just, maybe next year.
It does, but I don't think it's too much of a hard sell. I mean, every single day, every one of us at the company, we're immersed in travel. We're constantly seeing cool vacations, new properties that are just opening for the first time. I'm pretty sure everybody that works at the company has a bucket list that's several pages long. So as soon as something comes up through Travelzoo that one of us is excited to go do, it's pretty easy to jump on those trips and take full advantage of the experience.
That's very cool. I really like that. So tell me, when you mentioned that you didn't know a lot about Travelzoo when you had that first kind of phone screening or phone interview or whatever, as the conversations continued, do you remember, and are you willing to share what it was that seemed the most exciting to you about that opportunity?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, at the time, I thought, I'd worked in the travel industry probably for 14, 15 years when Travelzoo approached me. At the time, I thought I knew everything there was to know about the different sides and facets of the industry. So first and foremost, it was really cool to just learn about, the business model, sort of sitting in between a big OTA type model and working with partners so intimately on a grassroots level. The more I learned about it, the more compelling it was. And the only way I can really describe it is, if you're working at a hotel, you're really immersed in the hotel ecosystem, you're staying at hotels, you want to go check out other hotels. But when you work at a company like Travelzoo, you've got access to everything, whether it's amazing flight offers that get you into parts of the world you never thought you'd be able to afford to go, or an amazing experience, over in Europe, a week-long guided tour. We've got some amazing content in Canada right now that's really got me excited to go traveling in other parts just domestically and check out some of these places. But at the time, I kind of thought I knew how all the pieces fit together, and then to find this one company where everything's sort of available through one central hub. I was like a kid in a candy store. I was like, I don't need to just focus on hotels or airlines or cruises or some, niche side of the industry. I can work at this company and have access to all of it, get to work with, partners internationally, domestically, work with hotels, restaurants, and everybody in between. So for me, it was just that exciting. It was like kind of going from, a grocery store that only sells apples and oranges to a Costco or something where you've got access to everything.
Love that you brought this up, because it's something that I did want to bring up is, I don't know a lot about Travelzoo. I didn't do too much research because I love the spontaneity of these conversations. I don't want to come into the conversation with preconceived ideas. And since I started this podcast, this was always about defining, well, what is adventure travel? That has come up so many times. And for a while, I was kind of describing it as what it's not. So I'd say, well, it's not cruise ships. It's not, all-inclusive cruises. It could be, maybe smaller expedition type stuff. It wasn't all-inclusive resort hotels. And what I recognize is that we all have our own definitions of that. So any of our listeners that might be listening, well, Travelzoo sounds big, club membership, OTA. You mentioned cruises, hotels, flights. The reason I really wanted to have you on the show is partially because of your background, but also because I got the impression that maybe there's others out there that don't understand what some of these companies do, like Travelzoo. You mentioned everything. So let's dig in a little bit to the adventure side of it, however you define adventure. So our listeners can be like, oh, now I get it. And, this is not just about booking cruise ship vacations or resort hotels.
Yeah, I mean, the great thing about Travelzoo is we've got a wide and diverse member base, and they're always looking for, something unique. One of our mandates at the company is to service the entirety of the travel community. And whether that's somebody that's looking for a weekend away at a nice hotel in Vancouver, or if that's somebody that's looking to completely disconnect and get off the grid and one of our, amazing wilderness resort properties across British Columbia, or like the partner I was just chatting with in Nova Scotia, they've got some beautiful little cabins where you can just go and completely remove yourself from the modern world for a couple of days. So I've worked at a couple of different companies in the past that define themselves adventure travel focused. And I've got to be honest, the types of content that we put out at Travelzoo, they're not dissimilar from the packages that we would work on at some of those other places I worked at in the past. I mean, as an example, we've got, a great 9-day camping trip that's available, take you all through Vancouver Island. We're pre-booking that for the summer right now. That's available on our website right now. We also partner with local businesses like First Nations-led outdoor tourism companies in Tofino that will take you out for, a guided whale watching experience that's super intimate, really connected with the local people and lands. And so I think when it comes to adventure travel, it's, there's a lot of different people that come to us looking for different things, right? There's some people who are adventure travel might be a 4-day fishing package on northern coast of British Columbia, close to Alaska. There's other people that might want to rent a cabin in northern Ontario where it's just going to be their family for 6 days in the wilderness. They're going to be hanging out at the campfire every night under the stars. So I think it's really cool that we're able to put content out there that both satiates that appetite with our member community. But at the same time, if you need to get to that cottage up in northern Ontario, you could spend a couple days in Toronto on your way there, just heading up at a great hotel downtown and use that as sort of a bridge to adventure. But we've put out some really exciting stuff over the last few years, and we've got a Northern Lights partner that works with us in Whitehorse up in Canada's Yukon, and they put together amazing packages where you can get out and sort of spend a few nights under the stars. They'll wake you up if the Northern Lights come out so you can be asleep in your cozy bed. Not standing up. So really, I mean, I think it's anything that, inspires people, whether it's, a chance to get outside and disconnect, which we do see more often, people looking for that type of package from us, or it's something that's, really hardcore, like a 4-day sled dog adventure through the Northwest Territories. The cool thing is we offer something for, sort of everybody in between. And we've had intimate conversations with each one of those partners to sort of bring their package to life on our network along the way.
I mentioned a few moments ago that I looked at, well, what is not adventure travel? So I in my mind, I classified those things. I think pretty much everything else is. I think if you're pushing past your boundaries, if you're going exploring, if you're open, you're curious, you want to connect. I think there's so many things that fit very well into what we call adventure travel, niche travel, whatever. But it's sometimes easier to describe what I think it's not. So I'm curious, is there anything that you guys don't do? Like if I say, well, what don't you do? What's the first 2 or 3 things that come to mind?
I mean, we're really only travel focused. I know there's other sites and channels out there where you might be looking at a hotel stay, you click to the next page and it's like an oil change at the gas station in town or something. We don't do any of that stuff.
You don't do the oil changes.
No, it's really only things that you would want to go out and be enthusiastic about exploring. So that's kind of our mandate. But within that, I mean, there's a pretty wide range of partnerships that are available to us under that umbrella. We did one recently that was like a 20-day Everest base camp adventure package.
I was just going to ask you, that was the question I was coming up with next. I was going to say, so you're telling me that like if someone wants to go to Everest base camp?
Yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like, yeah.
That one
All
actually just
right.
came down. I was looking at the results for it yesterday, and it did really, really well. So apparently there's a lot of people in Canada and the US that want to hike to Everest Base Camp with Travelzoo.
That's very cool. Well, I think you've just answered anybody's question. That's why is Dana from Travelzoo on the Big World Made Small Adventure Travel podcast? That's part of it, because I do believe you guys have those opportunities. And also, and this is where we're going next, is just the conversation I had with you last time. I just realized pretty quickly you've been around this space for a while. And I'd like to walk our listeners through kind of how you got from where you were to where you are now in this, what sounds like a dream job for many, many people. How far back do we need to go, Dana, to get a feel for how that all transpired?
Well, I'm getting older now, so we got to go way back, I'm afraid, Jason. When I was a kid,
Well, me too.
well, I mean, it's always been in me, I think, to work in this industry. When I was a kid, I had this idea that, I was going to grow up and become some kind of Indiana Jones type character, like exploring archaeological ruins all around the world. And it's just what I was interested in as a kid. I read a lot of books, and my taste for adventure was really well developed when I was young. And I was always looking for ways to get involved in that side of thing. I went to university, I studied history. I was, well on track to that Indiana Jones career. But in the summers, you got to work, you got to have a job. And I was working as a forest firefighter in British Columbia, which was also a great job. I got to go to cool parts of the province that very few people will ever visit, spend all days in the woods and stuff like that. But I didn't really want to do that for long. And I'd applied to become an adventure tour guide. And I'd applied and I'd applied again. And every company that I applied to was like, Dana, it sounds like you really want to do this. And that's great. But you don't have, the wilderness first aid, the class 4 driver's license, this whole list of other qualifications I'd never heard of. So I thought that door was closed, and I headed off back to northern BC to firefight for another summer. And I was about halfway up when I got a call back from a company based on Vancouver Island. And they said, Dana, you did a great job in your interview. And if you can get back here in a day, then we've got spaces saved for you in these classes that you need to take, the first aid and the driver's class, but you got to be here in 18 hours. So I ended up getting out of the car, hitchhiking back to Vancouver, and then taking a bus and a ferry and another bus and walking to get to this interview deadline. And I got there and they gave me all the stuff. And 3 days later had all the certificates, and I was on my way.
Sweet. It sounds like they wanted to know if you really wanted it that bad, and maybe that was just the test. If he shows up, then great, and if he doesn't, then okay, he never really wanted it, so that's good. But I want to pick up there in a minute. But I want to go back to, what do you think it was that inspired you or gave you the desire to be Indiana Jones when you were a kid?
For one, I just, love those movies, and the times I spent with my family, watching them and laughing and, imagining all these cool places in the world and interesting and exciting things to do. But for me, it's the stories that go into sort of the historical side, both if you're a tour guide describing an area to somebody, talking about the local history and things like that. There's definitely a parallel there to the version of myself I saw growing up. But yeah, it's the stories of the place that makes those places come alive for people. It's those stories that have always made me feel most alive. And it was the opportunity to share stories like that with other people visiting a place maybe for the first time and contributing to their sense of what it's all about that I think really got me excited in those days.
You do recognize that not everybody feels that way when they're a kid, right? Not everybody wants to go explore and share. What I hear you saying is share experience, share openness, that type of thing. So I'm curious, you mentioned watching these movies. You've got some fond memories of that. Did you travel much when you were a kid? Did you have those opportunities? Did your parents travel? Did you have a crazy aunt or uncle that was sending you postcards? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, my family background is fairly international. Like, my family is originally from Norway, relocated to Canada and to a very remote part of British Columbia, growing up in the southeastern part of the province. It's the closest towns are several hours away. So travel was a big part of our life. Anytime we wanted to go anywhere, it started with 3-hour drive to the airport in a town through the mountain passes. And then from there we would go. But my parents were big travelers, and my sister's really excited about travel as well too. And my family today is all full of avid travelers. So definitely growing up, it was something that my family helped me develop. And we were always off exploring the wilderness every summer. We do multiple camping trips. We'd go connect with other family members. We'd go to Norway, connect with family there. So yeah, a big part of my life growing up was travel. And I think once I started getting involved in careers, it was like, well, this is just sitting in the same place every day. What kind of job can I do that'll bring me out into the world a little bit more? So definitely looking for those opportunities.
That were because you kind of mentioned, Southeast British Columbia. It was Southeast or Southwest British Columbia?
Southeast is where I grew up.
Get that right.
Yeah, I'm in the Southwest now. I haven't moved far.
Yeah. Yep. So Southeast, I'm trying to think. There's the Elk River. I've been to that area, and we don't need to be specific for an area, but where I'm going with this is were the other people growing up around you, the other kids at school, the other families, would you classify that? Was it like, oh, everybody lives in Southeast, British Columbia likes to get out and travel because they have to drive 3 hours to the airport? But I'm guessing that there are a lot of people that probably weren't quite as open about exploring. So what was your experience?
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it is kind of an insular town, but the other side of it is a lot of people move there deliberately because they think it's paradise, and when you find that sort of paradise, you don't really want to leave it that often. So it's interesting looking back. A lot of my, good friends from high school, like they've stayed in Nelson. They've built their lives in Nelson, in the southeast of right. British Columbia. And it's a great place to be. I make a point of going back with my family as often as possible. It just offers a completely different flavor of British Columbia than where I live today on the coast. So it's a special place for sure. And there's very few reasons to leave. I mean, it's a great place to live. You get 4 seasons. Everything's available despite being a remote community. And the people that live there are fantastic.
I grew up in a very nice area of northern Wyoming. Beautiful mountains there, hunting, fishing. There's so many wonderful things to do there. And what I've learned about myself, and I'm curious if this resonates with you, is that some people just have a harder time sitting still.
True.
No matter how great a place is, it's just like, oh, this is great. And what else is great? And then there's other people that are like, well, this is great. Why the heck? Sounds like you're maybe a little bit more like me in that regard. Cause I'm in Oaxaca, Mexico right now. I've been traveling full time for the last 4.5 years. Mm-hmm. Been to a lot of amazing places, and I show up and I usually think, oh, I could live here. And then a month later, I'm like, but where else is out there?
Exactly. Yeah. I did do that a lot. I was a real Goldilocks-er when it came to, where I was living, especially when I was working full-time as a tour guide. I was traveling 11 months a year. It was always like, well, where is home? And why do you even need a home at all to start with? But for me, I mean, it's always started and finished, where I live here in Western Canada. And that's a big part of, I think, why I was so passionate for so many years as a tour guide is I love it here. I think this is like the best place on earth. And I love to travel. And I spend a huge amount of the year traveling and exploring new places. I have favorite destinations in the world, places I've gone back to 3, 4, 5 times. But my heart's here, and I love it here. I think this is truly the greatest place on earth. You get, there's a desert in British Columbia if you're into deserts. There's the ocean. There's the Rocky Mountains on the east side of the province. And then up north, there's a whole bunch of other cool stuff going on just geographically and climatically. So it's a really special place to be, and my heart definitely lives here.
That's very cool. I appreciate you sharing that.
I got to be honest, Jason, there's colleagues at Travelzoo that give me a hard time for being such a homer and for loving British Columbia so much. They're like, Dana, you got to get out of here. You got to go on a vacation beyond the borders of your own province sometimes.
Well, I could tell you're super fascinated. I don't know if fascinated is the right word, but you obviously love the area you're in. Sounds like just love Canada in general, because you mentioned several other locations in Canada that you got pretty excited about. And I think it's pretty cool. It's good to have that grounding too. And let's get into kind of, okay, you took I heard bus, probably some walking. You got yourself from the forest fire into, or wherever you were working as a firefighter, and you got yourself into the training. You went through the few days, you got your certifications. Let's start there. Give our listeners kind of an idea. I don't want to move forward too fast, but I guess the first question I want to ask you is, just what were your initial impressions when the first season that you started doing this? Was it what you thought it was going to be? What were some surprises? And then of course.
Yeah, no, it was a funny time, right? Because you want something for so long. When you finally get it, you're kind of a bit like the cat catching a mouse. You're like, what now? Right. So I definitely had that moment, and going through the training, it was pretty straightforward, show up, learn the stuff, pass the tests. The scary part came when I finished all the training, came back to the base where the headquarters was, there's vans being loaded up, there's camping equipment everywhere sort of thing. And my boss came up and kind of slapped a packet of documents in my hand and was like, all right, well, you better leave in the next hour if you want to make it up to Whitehorse by Thursday. This is like 2 days in the future. And I was like, okay. And I went and I loaded up all the camping stuff and, flipped through the manual. It was a pretty basic tour outline, like, day one, pick up the group at Whitehorse Airport. And that was 3 days away. So I was like, all right, step one is to get to Whitehorse. So I loaded all the camping stuff and pretty much drove, nonstop for 20 hours to get up there. Yeah, the rest is history. Honestly, this outline to this day is probably one of the most basic tour itineraries I've ever seen. It was like day 2, drive to Tombstone Territorial Park, and it's like 9 hours away, set up camp, have dinner, and go for a guided hike. And that's it. And I was like, it's my first day as a tour guide, and I just met these people.
And you were the trip leader? Like there was no one else? This was your first trip out, was go pick these people up at the airport, roughly, kind of follow this itinerary and find fun stuff to do along the way. That's what it sounded like.
Pretty much. I mean, it was really basic. I was actually supposed to do a co-guided trip with a senior guide.
Yeah, that's what I would expect.
And that was going to be really easy. I was all excited about that. It was supposed to be a 4-day trip with a bunch of police cadets from Edmonton. There were all going to be like 80 of them. They needed 4 guides. I was going to be the most junior guide. It was a great chance to learn, but unfortunately it never happened because the Yukon guy had injured himself. So they needed somebody who could go. And I was the, newest member of the team. I was also the youngest guy. I was like 21 when this was happening. So yeah, they're just like, well, he's got nothing going on. He has no kids and he has no family. No one's going to miss him. So let's just send him up to the Yukon for 3 weeks with this group of Dutch tourists. And that's, I think, short straw, to put it simply. Short straw is how I ended up.
Wow.
Yeah.
Had you been in positions either earlier as a teenager or in school, or maybe even with I don't know, I'm going to say the fire service. I know that's not right. You can correct me. But had you been in kind of leadership positions where you were in charge of getting people safely from point A to point B? Or was this like they just threw you right in?
Not really. Like I'd been in, captain of the golf team or something. That was pretty much.
Well, yeah, you're good.
The most experience I'd ever had. But no, I mean, honestly, at the time, I never even questioned it. Like 21-year-old me was so confident. I was like, oh, these people will be lucky. They've got me as their guide. Like, I'll just get up there and it'll all be fine. And it more or less was.
It'll work out. You had faith in your ability to figure it out. That's cool. Remember the very first guide. Yeah, I remember the first guide trip I did. I had been wanting to be a fly fishing guide in Montana. I got myself a job at a shop and I had the boat. I had everything ready. And the guys I was working with, like, well, Jason, you need more experience. You need this, you need that. And I was kind of like managing some of the guide schedules and all this stuff. One day I showed up and they said, hey, so-and-so called in. He's not going to be here. Do you want to take, I had my license all set up, ready to go. And they're like, hey, do you, so-and-so didn't show up. You got your boat out back. You want to take these people? And I'm like, yeah, sure, of course. And I was terrified. I was like, this is my first day. And at the end of the day, there were a few mishaps that the clients never knew, but I knew, and my people around me knew, but the clients never knew. We got to the end of the day and I dropped them off at their car and they looked at me and said, well, we've never been on a guide trip before, but you really set the bar high.
Oh, that's great.
And I was like, do I tell them that I had never been on a guide trip either. I had never been a client on a guide trip. And I was like, torn. Do I tell them? Well, I'd never been on a guide trip either, but you guys are great and you set the bar high. But I kept that to myself and kind of regretted. I should have maybe shared with them. But I'm imagining the conversations, like when you met the group, because I know, like, you sit down with a group of people, they're like, how long have you been doing this? What do you like most? What do you like? Have you had any bad clients? Do you have any crazy stories? Did that?
It did. It did come up. I remember, and they kept asking me how old I was, and like, how old do you need to be to have a driver's license in Canada, and like all these questions that made me really aware.
As you're driving,
yeah, they're like, hey, have you ever driven a van like this? And I was like, yeah, once for sure. Yeah. But there was constant moments like that. And there's no hiding from a group like that either. It was like 10 Dutch people. We were camping for 3 weeks in Yukon and Alaska. Like, we spent almost a month together. The whole time you're together with the people, as you would know, right? So yeah, it's
easy to hide it for a day. 3 weeks is a little difficult. And
it never occurred to me to bamboozle them or anything. I was just like, yeah, that's my first time doing this itinerary, trying to make it sound like I'd done a lot of other itineraries. When I was, in reality,
no,
like
you
I've
weren't
never,
bamboozling them at all.
yeah, never done any of that stuff, but it was great. And like in a situation like that, as I'm sure you know, it's like it's the people themselves that power the trip, right? It's their enthusiasm, and they all have ideas about what you're gonna be. I might have 3 lines in the itinerary for that day, like drive to this place 700 kilometers away, take a rest stop along the way, like where, but the people all have ideas, like they all know what they want to do. This is one lady, when we go to this place on this day, I really want to stop here and get a photo at this thing, and so you're like, oh well, there's the rest stop for the day, that works. They keep you going, with their interest. They're like, oh, I really want to see a bear. It's day 10. We haven't seen a bear. Well, let's go down, check out the salmon bearing river and see if we can find some wildlife down there. So yeah, I mean, a lot of it was scary for sure. Like I remember having that feeling, where you're like, am I going to be sick? Like pretty much the whole time for that month. But, the people were so good, and the destination is so spectacular that like a guide doesn't need to do a lot of heavy lifting in the Yukon or Alaska. Like the location takes care of the rest.
I suspect there may be some people listening to this that would disagree, but I don't know. I've had a lot of conversations. I've been around the business for a long time. I've been on many guided trips. I've been the guide, and I've been on many guided trips since then. And I think the common denominator for having a good experience or a good guide is just the personality, just the ability to connect with people and the willingness to connect with people. It's that openness and curiosity about people, because if you show up with the right attitude and personality, that's more than half the battle right there. Whether you know all the details and the facts. I remember I was on a pack trip with some guides, and I heard I was leading the group, but I was just a trip leader. I was not a guide on that trip. I was just there I'm not even sure why I was there. I know why I was there, but I remember one of the clients asked one of the guides, it's like, oh, which mountain range is that over here? And the guide spouted out something that I knew was completely wrong, but he did it with such confidence. And I was like, yeah. And just so many opportunities that I've seen guides really overcome lack of knowledge and maybe technical ability. They've just overcome it with their ability to just connect with people. Like if one of the clients knew that it was the wrong mountain range and they said it, he would have just rolled with it and it would have been fine. Nobody would have thought anything about it. But then the other part of it is, you kind of mentioned it, and is that ability to just kind of have faith, just confidence in yourself to figure stuff out. Maybe that's a little easier when you're 21 for not everybody, but some people. If you were to put your finger on where you got that from, that just like, yeah, sure, I'll figure it out. Anything come to mind, or is it just burn into you?
One of the things I really thought a lot about, during that specific tour, but also pretty much throughout the next year that I worked to develop my guide career, was this sense of responsibility, right? Like, a lot of people, depending on where you live in the world, you get 2 weeks vacation, 4 weeks vacation, maybe more if you live in Europe or you've been with a company for a long time. But there's just such a acute awareness for me of how people choose to spend that leisure time. If you only get 2 weeks off a year and you're going to spend one of those weeks with me as a guide, that's a lot of responsibility for me. Like that's 50% of your free time that you're going to spend with me in a year. And I'd better do a good job, there's a sense of stewardship there. I don't want that week of vacation to feel wasted for anybody. It's like, it's got to go smooth. It's got to be fun. If problems arise, we got to deal with them and come out of it better than had things gone smoothly.
Did you figure that out along the way, or do you feel like you went into that very first opportunity feeling like all that responsibility, or is that something you kind of figured out along the way?
Yeah, that was the big surprise for sure for that first tour specifically. And even for the next few that came after that was, this isn't fun and frivolous anymore. This may have been a fun idea for me to be a tour guide 3 weeks ago when it was just a fantasy, but now I'm doing it. And like the reality of it, it kind of hit me on that side. It was like, this is real. These people need to be safe and they need to have a great time. and you've got to deliver everything that's in the itinerary too. So it was like those three things, keep people safe, deliver what's promised, and really own the responsibility of these people spending their week of leisure time with me here in this place. So yeah, all those things together, I think, kind of became like the bedrock that my guiding philosophy grew out of over the next few years as I started to, visit new destinations and take bigger groups and different types of groups around the world, for sure.
So if you go from that first opportunity until, you said over the next few years. So if you went from that moment in time, fast forward to 3 years later, you've been doing this for a few years. Can you walk me through? I'm just curious, and I suspect other people would need to hear this as well, is like, what was the typical emotional, I don't know how to ask this because I wasn't planning to, but from the moment you're like, okay, I just got my manifest and I'm meeting these people in a couple days, to you're dropping them off at the airport, what is going on as far as your levels of stress, enjoyment? How would you kind of describe the process of what you were going through? And it might be different for other guides, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cyclical, right? Like after you start getting into it and you're doing either the same itinerary a bunch of times or doing a few variations that are really similar, like you feel like you're slipping into the river. You get in at the beginning, you get out at the end, go back to the top and repeat it, sort of thing. So there's almost like an expected emotional cadence you get into when you're doing it all the time like that, right? And there's always like a bit of panic at the beginning when you got to get everything ready to be gone for 3 weeks. Like you got to step out of your life for almost a month. So, what do I need to do? I got to make sure the bills are paid. I got to take out the garbage so the place doesn't smell bad. I used all my blister band-aids on those new shoes I had on the last trip. Got to get new ones of those. So there's like kind of a frenzied preparation stage, and then you get into it, and there's always a bit of, okay, what's the group going to be like? Who's going to be the one guy that, causes problems on this tour? Try to feel them all out.
And just hoping it's not you. Please don't let it, because every group has one guy or one person. And if you can't, I've heard this said, if you can't figure out who that one person is, it's probably you.
Exactly. So you got to figure out the guy, the one who's going to be like asking for extra pillows, or, the room's too small. That you got to figure out that guy, but then you also got to figure out the other guy who's going to be like the one that jumps in with jokes here and there. Mm-hmm. That about Cone Mountain because it's shaped like a triangle. There's always a guy who gives the comments, so you want to figure out who that guy is pretty quick and get to know him too. But yeah, then you get into it, and just kind of this feeling of always you're hovering, right? You're like, everything's going good. The person was there to meet us for this. The lunch went smooth. The breakfast was in the right room. The bags were all there, and so you're kind of hovering in that like things are going good so far type of
it could change
mentality. Yeah,
one flat tire could change it all.
Exactly. And honestly, like I've had a flat tire everywhere you can imagine. We were driving up to Prudhoe Bay one time with a group, like going way up in Alaska, right up to where they extract oil right on the Arctic Ocean. We were driving up there one day, and the bus driver's like, "Dana, we got a problem." And I was like, "Oh no, what's going on?" And he's like, "Come look here." And I look in his big rearview mirror down the side of the bus. There's just a streak of fluid behind the bus as far as the eye could see. And I'm like, "Oh my God, man. Like we're like 300 miles from the place. We're on a dirt road. There's nothing going on. We haven't seen a car in hours." And it's like, okay, how are we going to fix this? We get everybody out of the tour group, to find a creek, got to put a plastic bag in the radiator. The cap had come off and all the fluid had drained out. So it's like bucket chain from this river. The whole tour group's participating, filling up the radiator, plugging it with a plastic bag, and then 300 more miles to Prudhoe Bay, sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, things do happen, but you're grateful when they're going well. You're ready for them to go wrong. And you just keep your fingers crossed, right? Hopefully you don't need to deal with a problem, but I'm sure like you've got like 5 solutions to every potential problem in the back of your mind at all times. So, you hope nothing goes wrong. You're grateful that it goes smooth, but you're ready if things go off the rails.
Curious. I suspect that group of people that were doing the water chain from the river to the radiator.
Yeah, that was great.
River to radiator. Yeah. I suspect that most of them, maybe all of them, you tell me, but I suspect an awful lot of them, that was probably one of the things they remembered about the trip, and probably not in a bad way. It was probably, because I find, unless things go horribly wrong, as long as you end up back at the airport with the same number of people you started with, that's a good thing. That's the first rule in the guidebook. But what do you think when you think things like that go sideways? Do you feel like it creates more of a bond in the group and more of a sense of adventure?
Percent. Yeah. I mean, especially if the outcome is a positive one, like in that scenario, it would have been a different story if we all had to sit there for 8 hours and, somebody's got to come and get us and we got to go back there. We're getting to the hotel at like 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Things could have gone really badly there. But when things work out, like in that scenario, yeah, I mean, the group all comes together. People laugh about it. I mean, groups from different parts of the world impact that as well too. This specific group, they were all from Australia. There was a handful of New Zealanders in there and some people from New Caledonia. But that tour group, of all the groups I've led, and this is 14 years ago, this is a long time ago, that group still hosts annual get-togethers in Australia where I think about half the group still gets together. They all camp out in some part of Australia and they all tell stories. I remember when we did get to the end of the road on that trip, it was one guy's birthday. It was his 80th birthday that day. And he had an Australian Speedo on. And he got me to take him down to the Arctic Ocean. And him and I went swimming. It was like ice floes and black gravel. It looked so cold and uninviting. But this 80-year-old dude, it was his birthday that day. And he was like, I'm going swimming in the Arctic Ocean in these way too revealing Australian flag Speedos. And he's like, Dana, you're coming with me. And I was like, oh, dude, like you go over there, but okay. All right, I'll get in the water at the same time as you. You're just going to be 100 feet out of sight down the beach. And we did. And like that guy, he was a really, really cool guy. And he was kind of the leader of all those get-togethers, for the group and everything afterwards. But yeah, absolutely. Through adversity, like people come together, they still tell that story. Something had happened earlier on that trip in the Rockies where this, really short lady on the tour had struggled to get in her bed, and like 5 other members of the tour group came and like hoisted her in. So there was like little things like that would happen along the way. And yeah, the group just comes together, and it's funny. They Zoom call me every once in a while from Australia. It'll be like around Christmas time and they all get together and it's like all sunny there. And they're like, "Oh, Dana, what's happening, mate?" And I'm like, "Oh, wow. Good to see you guys." They're like, "How's Archer?" Talking about my son.
That is so cool. And I suspect, I mean, those things, I remember I was on a fam trip in Namibia with a lot meaning maybe 8 to 10 to Travel Trade Association World Summit. And we had an opportunity to go out and spend a few days with one of the local operators. And they took us on this multi-day journey through the mountains and deserts of Namibia. It was incredibly fascinating. It was so much fun. And one of the things I remember the most was we were going to go from one side of the mountains over to the coast. So we're going to go up over the mountains down to what they call the Skeleton Coast because there were a lot of shipwrecks there. It's a very rugged place. And anyway, but there were no roads. We were just literally just going to find our way across the mountain is what it was put out to us, right?
Wow.
And of course, this is a new area. We've really haven't been in this area, but we're really excited about it because we want to open it up and whatever. And the day that we drove over the mountain, stuck in the sand 2 or 3 times. And I remember thinking, and I'm pretty adventurous, but I remember thinking, holy crap, like this is serious. We're out in the middle of Namibia, which is like the second most sparsely populated country in the world. And we're out in the desert. There's no tracks anywhere. I mean, we're literally just driving across these sand dunes to get to the next, not even a gravel road, just the next hard surface, I guess is the best way to describe it. And we get stuck in the sand and they turned the wheels and the vehicles just kept getting deeper and deeper in the sand. And I was like, holy cow, this is pretty intense. And we'd spend half hour, 45 minutes, an hour with the guides underneath trying to do stuff. And then we'd all get behind and we'd push it and we'd get it out of the sand. And, oh, we're going to live. Oh, this is great. Yeah. We're going to live. And then we'd get stuck again. And we're like, oh man, we're pushing our luck here. Moral of the story is, we got to the end of that and I realized, holy crap, if they could replicate that every week with a new group, because it was such a bonding experience, the adrenaline gets going and then they come in and save the day like a good guide is supposed to do. And I was like, if they could repeat that safely, for every group they take, new area, we don't know where we're going, but whatever. And then you get to the coast and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy we made it. We're alive. And it was really, really cool.
That does sound cool. A real adventure.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's sometimes hard but it's also the way that the guide, actually, here's a question I've been wanting to ask someone for a long time that's familiar with guiding in the Northwest. I went with a fly fishing guide in, I think it was either BC. Yeah, I think it was southeastern BC. And we were going to go to this river. We had to hike down in. And pretty much the entire time we were hiking, he was hollering, "Hey, bear. hey bear, hey bear, like, and he was telling us, well, if I say that, then the bears will hear us coming and they'll leave us alone. Is he just full of crap? I mean, is he doing this for us? Because it definitely raised the adrenaline level. It was definitely made it a much more intense experience. Just having him constantly reminding us that there's bears in this area, and he's there because he knows what he's doing. He's there to protect us from the bears. And I remember at the end of the day, I was like, wow, this guy's pretty cool. He's a stud. Or do you think he was just full of crap?
I mean, I would never throw a fellow guide under the bus.
No. And I'm, me too. But I remember thinking, even if he had no need to do that, I was like, wow, he really made an impression with that, because it takes it from a walk in the woods to something like, this is intense, and look at us, we're doing something really, really cool. And
that is legit, right? Like, that's something I do here, living in the Comox Valley on Vancouver Island with my family when we go on hikes up at Mount Washington, for sure. I usually do the clap, like I'll go out in front and like clap loud, because I think the sound travels further that way. But my wife is a hey bear enthusiast. Hey bear, hey bear. So it's absolutely real. Like, it's a good thing to do it with a group. I mean, in a group, oftentimes people are making enough noise that you don't really need to do it. But I did that once with a group in the Yukon, and we heard the bear. It was like 60 feet away. We got close and just heard a huge crash in the forest, heard it running away. And then we got to a clearer part, I don't know, maybe 10 minutes later down the trail, and we could see it down in the plain, like still running away. So yeah, it's necessary sometimes, and it definitely works for sure.
That's cool. I mean, as someone who grew up in northern Wyoming, spending a lot of time in the mountains, and by the point I'd been on that trip, I guided anglers into Yellowstone Park and all that stuff. And I had never done it. I mean, but I think the further north you go, the more serious it gets. I don't know why.
Yeah.
In my mind, that's the way it is. But, I do remember a joke that we used to tell that was something like, how can you tell the difference between grizzly bear poop, and one of them has bells in it, and the other one smells like pepper spray?
Yeah, exactly.
Meaning that it doesn't matter if you have the bells on your belt making noise, or if you've got pepper spray, bears don't care.
The bells are funny.
The tourists, because I was working in a fly shop on the Yellowstone River, we saw a lot of bear bells and pepper spray, even though I seldom ever had that stuff myself. But anyway, so
yeah. Oh, totally. The bells are funny. Like, we would often joke about the bells among the other guides. It would be like, it's just so they know dinner's coming, Like
that type of, exactly.
The bell jingling down the way.
and then maybe the pepper spray just kind of adds some flavor to the meat. I'm not sure.
A little mild seasoning.
Oh boy. All right. So I want to get back to kind of what you're doing now and figure out, what are the other steps as far as we got is you guided for a few years, but maybe it was a lot more than that. So kind of walk us through that.
Yeah. So I turned it into a full-time thing. Like, I was going to law school at the time. That was sort of what I was going to, I was working towards being a lawyer when I eventually got all the guiding out of my system. And all right. I remember, sorry.
Don't go any further. That kind of requires me to ask some questions, because I've spoken with some people that went to law school, maybe were even lawyers, and decided, holy crap, this is not for me. And then they went and became adventure guides. So hearing you say I was an adventure guide trying to pay my way through law school, which seems like two very different things. We got to dig a little deeper in that. I'm not sure where to go with that. But as you were out enjoying nature and this and that, and you wanted to be a lawyer, what was behind that?
I don't know. I realized in like third year university that Indiana Jones was not actually a job. And so I realized I would eventually need to do something else. And the law has been a big provider for my family. My dad's been a lawyer. There's some uncles that are lawyers and stuff like that. So
all right.
It seemed like something, like my dad was a small town lawyer. So, it's not like a big corporate guy or anything. You're doing like wills and like property disputes and stuff. And so, it was cool that he was connected to all these people in town. And I thought, it'd be nice to be that connected where I live. But yeah, I realized sort of towards the end that, I was lucky as a guide. I got to spend, every day with people having the best day of their year, right? Like, people don't go on vacation to have a bad time. They're excited about where they're going. They're committed to having a good time unless things go really wrong. So I was having a great time. I loved being a guide. I'd really sort of built up a business around it where I'd incorporated myself, and I would lease out my personal guiding services to different companies. So it was becoming a good professional job. And at the end of law school, what do? You go be an intern. So I would have been making less. And then I realized that if I did go down that road, that people would only be coming to see me on like the worst day of their lives.
Yeah, nobody's excited to go talk to their
No.
lawyer, any lawyers. It's only when things are really uncomfortable, difficult, as opposed to, like you said, being a wilderness guide or
Yeah. So, there's that realization and the fact that, financially it would have actually been a step back for at least the first year. So, I had no interest, very swiftly pivoted and then just kept on going in tourism until today. So it was a blessing for sure that I made that good choice, because it was only, a year after making that decision that I ended up meeting my wife at one of the hotels I was bringing a group to. So, the rest is history, as they say. And she would have never married a lawyer.
You found a good one. I can tell. I shouldn't say that because I'm sure there's lawyers listening to the show. But a woman that would choose an adventure guide or an outdoor guide over a lawyer, just on those two things. Obviously, there's so many more things involved in finding the right person. But if you said, that's, I respect that. That's pretty cool. So let's talk about that, because actually that can be a real challenge for people that work in tourism, especially if they're going away for a month at a time here or there, whether it's, even if it's local in the same country or international, or get a lot of people that end up, they spend 6 months here, 6 months there, flipping their time between Chile and Canada, and it can make relationships really, really challenging. What would you like to share with our listeners about that?
Yeah, it's all true. I shouldn't say that. I know a lot of people in the industry to this day that have, been married for 20 years and they're both guides and they're off all the time.
Wow.
Like that.
See, you touched on something there, because that's the thing. They don't necessarily have to both be guides, but if there's not some alignment or some appreciation for that type of work, it can feel like, if you don't care anything about tourism, adventures, not your thing.
Mm-hmm.
And your partner keeps leaving to go do it. And then he comes back. Oh my gosh, we had a great group. It was so much fun. And the whole time you're gone, she's like, why am I stuck here by myself? And he's not here to help with the kids or whatever.
Totally.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's where things get complicated, right? Is where you if you do want to put down roots, then it means being around more, not being literally everywhere else 97% of the time. So, for me, that's kind of what it was. It was done the job for a long time. I traveled around and kind of checked off a lot of the places I wanted to visit and work in at that point. And you meet the right person, and it's a great reason to spend more time in one place for sure. And so for me, that was the real catalyst for spending all this time on the road, being everywhere but British Columbia, to really looking for reasons to spend more time at home and more time in the province, and looking for careers that would be a nice jumping off point for somebody, as a tour guide to, transfer those skills into a sedentary workplace for sure.
Sedentary. Interesting choice of words. Because I was just getting ready to ask you. So tell me more about Travelzoo. But I don't know if I'd use the word sedentary, but I get what you mean by that.
Yeah, just not moving around.
Yeah. So talk about the transition from the constant moving around, the guiding, to a job like you've got now that's more sedentary, that probably works better for relationships. How did you get from that spot to your job at Travelzoo?
Yeah, it's, I'm the kind of person that has to love, whatever I'm doing for me to be successful at it. And, at this point, I'd been a guide for a long time, and I'd seen colleagues that had maybe been doing it for too long. I'm sure you'd recognize the same signs I did at that point. You're getting a little short with the group, or your heart's not in it. You're starting to think more about what you're going to do at the end of the day, or wishing you were somewhere else or something like that. So I'd kind of seen those signs in a few colleagues and thought, boy, that guy, they shouldn't be leading groups anymore. And I started to see a little bit of that in myself. I was like, I sure wish, I wonder what she's doing. I wonder what's going on at home. So yeah, you just kind of start moving in a different direction. And fortunately, there's a lot of good opportunities for you to kind of transfer the skill set from being a tour guide. I mean, you have to be good at so many things, and there's so much going on all the time. As a tour guide, there's a lot of good careers you can transition into. For me, the first and easiest step was to move from being like a, nomadic concierge to being a concierge at a hotel. And so I did that for a couple of years afterwards. Absolutely loved that job. It was everything I loved about being a tour guide, only at one place every day. So you're still planning adventures for people and making sure that they extract the most from their leisure time on vacation. But you get to go home and sleep in your own bed. And I got to work with some amazing people and really bring some special moments to life for people when I was doing that job. So I loved it. Yeah. So coming out of the concierge experience, it was looking to develop something a little bit more robust that I could work towards and kind of start leveraging some of those relationships I had in the industry in a different way to bring people into different places. And during that time, I worked for a really well-regarded luxury FIT tour company based in Vancouver with a visionary owner who just totally turned my perception of the industry on its head and showed me, what's happening in the really highest levels of the Canadian tour industry, like amazing lodge vacations, arrive at by helicopter type stuff. So that was a really fun time, fun learning experience. And shortly after that, I started up with Travelzoo and the world just opened right up.
It's very, very super cool. We've got a lot of people to listen to this that want to be in your shoes, or maybe they want to be an adventure guide. Maybe they're fighting forest fires and they want to go be a guide somewhere. What are just real quick, give me one or two tips, suggestions, or realities. What should they consider before they take any steps, or what is the best first step? I know that's a very broad question. I'm curious what you're going to come up with.
Yeah, it's a good question for sure, because it's the type of job that's definitely not for everybody. I mean, I absolutely had some moments that first year where I was wondering if I'd made the right choice, if I was up to the task, And it's being away, right? It's being away from everything and from everybody in your life for that long. I mean, that's the first thing that you've got to be up for is just understanding the toll it will take to be away from your life and living a very different life for most of your time. But I mean, if that's not an issue, I mean, maybe you're someone who's looking out at the world more than you're looking in at your own life, and that's appealing. So that's probably the first thing. The second thing is you've got to love something about it, right? You've got to really love something about it, whether it's the constant momentum of just doing the job and being on the go all the time, or if you love the people in the groups, you really love that element of hospitality where you're welcoming people in and making sure they have a great time. Or if you love the place that you're visiting and you just want to spend as much time there as possible in whatever capacity you can. It's got to be something like that because it's the kind of job where it becomes a grind over time. Like you could be doing anything. And if it's like a 30-day trip, by day 24, you're going to be tired. It doesn't matter what it is. So it's that passion for the role that's going to carry you to the end of the trip. And that's definitely the second major qualification, I would say. But beyond that, I mean, there's really no one size fits all for guides. Like in my time in the industry, like you were saying, you work with ex-lawyers. One of my favorite co-guides ever was a retired Canadian RCMP officer who was in his early 70s. This guy, Gary, he was my best friend. We did all these tours together. Absolutely loved the guy. On paper, we couldn't have been more different. I was like 24, 25. He's like 73. He's so serious. I'm super goofy. But we became best friends, and he's one of the best guides I've ever worked with. And there was all kinds of people on the spectrum in between our two careers, people that had been a nurse for 12 years or someone who'd been a waitress for 3 years. There was one guy who'd been a doctor, like some kind of pathologist at the hospital. He'd gone off to become a tour guide. So beyond those first two things, like where you need to be ready to be away from home and you've got to have some kind of passion that'll carry you throughout the itineraries, I would say it's a pretty vague beyond that. I mean, it's anybody.
It is. Yeah, it is. I mean, I've had conversations with people about, what type of person, what if you were going to go out and recruit guides, and the rule was it has to be a brand new guide. It has to be somebody who's never been a guide. Where would you go looking for them? And we've discussed, I've had guests discuss school teachers, or bartenders is one that comes up quite often, or anybody that works in the service industry.
Yeah.
And I thought, bartenders would make pretty good group leaders.
For sure.
Because they're so used to managing a bunch of different people, and sometimes they have to set boundaries. Sometimes, as long as maybe some bartenders at the end of their shift just want to drink a lot.
Yeah.
But you know what? The reality is sometimes a lot of guides do that too.
It's true. That is absolutely true. But I mean, that's a really good example. Like somebody, a bartender, they would be a great fit for it, right? Because you get 1,000 things happening at the bar. What's that guy doing? What's that guy doing? And then you still have to be professional throughout. You've got your safety requirements with not over serving. Like that's a great parallel for sure. You're
And
chatting with people and you got to be
yeah.
hospitable. Yeah.
And I think one of the challenges that maybe people don't recognize when they get into, I mean, I've run into lodge managers, hospitality people in the small space. Let's imagine a safari camp in Africa and you've got 12 guests there. And one of the most important things I think is just to make every single guest, and this is the challenge, is make every single guest feel seen, heard, appreciated. Because maybe you've got one guy who's really funny, makes a lot of jokes, and is really easy to get along with. So the camp manager might just always want to sit down with that guy because he's fun. It's easy. I don't have to work because this guy is kind of entertaining the whole crowd.
Yeah.
But then you've got the more quiet, reserved people that are staying behind, or not staying behind, but they're just not as vocal. And it's easy to forget about them. They, you know, just because they're quiet doesn't mean they don't want to be seen.
Yeah.
And that's a trick. I mean, one of the jobs I got in the business, I got a job managing a small fly fishing and scuba diving lodge off the coast of Belize. And it's because the first time I went there, the guy who was kind of the fishing coordinator there, I recognized half the people at the lodge, is a maximum 20 guests, and he couldn't remember half their names, you know, after a week.
Yeah.
And there were some people that he would just buddy with, and other people he couldn't even remember their names. And it was obvious. Ask them, you know, 5 days in, he's like, tell me your name again. And I'm just, whoa. So I went to the owner of the place. I said, hey, when this guy doesn't work out, because it was obvious,
yeah,
I would love to come do the job. And, you know, I got a call a couple months later.
Good for you. You're like, I already know all their names.
So when I took the job, I made a real point of memorizing everybody's name before I ever met him. You know, I'd have the manifest. I'd go into town to pick them up on Saturday. I had memorized everybody's name. And then all I had to do was connect the name with usually what they were wearing or something identifiable about them. And we'd all meet on the boat before we took the boat trip out, and I group on the back of the boat, and I'd introduce everybody. And everybody thought, oh, wow, he just met us and he already knows all of our names. And then we'd get back to the lodge about an hour. And first thing they'd all do is go to their room and change their clothes, take a shower. Yeah. Whatever, do their hair, whatever. And then they come back up to the lodge for cocktails. And it was like, that was the challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Post wardrobe change. Do you still recognize him?
It's like, oh, darn, man. He's no longer Bob in blue. He's,
yeah,
you know, but yeah. So anyway, Dana, we've discussed so many things. I want to make sure that we've got to, you know, if there's anything extra you want to share about Travelzoo, you, life philosophies, anything like that. So I'm going to ask you, what did I forget to ask you, or what do you wish I would have asked you before we?
It's been a fun chat, Jason. Honestly, it's fun to you know, talk about the guiding days, and just general industry hang is always well appreciated on my side. I mean, the only thing I would leave your listeners with is just a reminder to check out Travelzoo. What's happening with us at the company is super exciting lately. You know, we've moved away from being that sort of one size fits all company to being a really kind of concentrated club based entity that really listens to the members and looks to produce the type of content that aligns with our members' vacation needs. And that transition has been super exciting. You know, we've seen a real community grow out of our paid membership side, and some of the promotions that we're doing around like our member days events. Next one's coming up in just a couple of months. You know, those exclusive travel opportunities that we're putting in front of our club are not to be missed. I mean, my family's vacations, I've got 3 booked that came from our last member day event. And Travelzoo is a great place if you're a traveler that wants to get out and just check out as much as you can in the span of a year. You save a little money on 2 or 3 of your vacations, and all of a sudden you can afford a 4th one this year. So it's a great way for people to, you know, get out with a fun travel package, but relying on us to do sort of the curation. We're only going to put, you know, really top-notch world-class experiences in front of our members. So you can always rest easy that our producers, our editors, our publishers, or maybe even our salespeople have been to the place and checked it out, really vetted it before it ever shows up in an email from us.
What you're saying right now, what I'm hearing is there are OTAs out there. There are websites out there. You can go find a lot of different stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what I hear the difference, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that because, you know, the people you work with, I think you use the word vetted. Honestly, that's where it came down to, because I've learned as a full-time traveler for the last 4.5 years, I've learned that there's a wide range of things and quality levels that you can book on some of these other websites.
It's true.
And you
Yeah.
quickly realize that, holy crap, if I was the CEO of, I'm not going to mention any other websites or companies, but if I was the CEO of this and that, and I realized that we were offering this on our website, it would be embarrassing.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the difference, right?
It really is. And I mean, it's both a curse and a blessing, right? And it's a blessing as a member and as a subscriber and user of Travelzoo myself. It's a huge relief to know that anything that shows up on the website or appears in my inbox as a promotional email is something that has been vetted by our team. It's a curse on the sales side because I can't just approach anybody in Canada about a partnership. They all have to have, 4.0 or higher on TripAdvisor or on Google reviews for me to even have a conversation with a partner. So on the working side, that definitely presents some limitations, but as a avid user and enthusiast for Travelzoo myself personally, it's something I appreciate the most about the company. I mean, even the behind the scenes, like we had our weekly top 20 meeting just yesterday. We have it every Wednesday, and it's a whole community of us, meeting both virtually and in person, and we go through all the upcoming deals for the next week, and we get like really hyped on them. Like you should have seen somebody yesterday. We were doing a promotion for the Azores, which is one of our best bets for this year. And one of the ladies was like, I stayed at that resort last year. It's awesome. All you guys got to go. And it's funny because you're working at this company and it is a company. It's like we're traded on the, the US stock exchange, and there's a corporate entity that underlies Travelzoo for sure. But at the end of the day, it's a bunch of travel enthusiasts in a room talking about trips they've done or trips they want to do or trips they think their aunt would like to do or anything like that. So it's a really fun place to work, and everybody's just solely focused on putting the best possible experiences in front of our members.
Since you mentioned specifically TripAdvisor, I'll just say this. I'll say that, I don't think there's any meetings going on at booking.com, for example.
Exactly.
Where they're all sitting around about, look at this new place that that we came across, and this, you just can't even imagine that. So I get it. I mean, when I worked at Orvis, ran their fly fishing international, their international travel business for a while. My job was to go scout places to see if they qualified for endorsement. They really had to meet some requirements. And unfortunately, and sometimes it was just like, did I like it? Would I be proud to send our guests there? Would I be proud to bring my mom there? Whatever. If, not everything's the right fit for everybody, but honestly, if I'd be proud. And sometimes I'd visit these places and it was just like, my gosh, I've got 3 days here by myself with the lodge owner. And he's standing there pissing off the patio, telling me crude jokes.
No.
And I'm like, oh man, I'm supposed to be here 3 days. And then I know that I have to write a report, because anytime we go visit a place and we reject it from the program, you've got to say why. And that was the hard side of the job that most people don't realize. So it resonates with me hearing you say what you're saying. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I get it. So
it's true. It's an interesting trap to be in for sure.
Very cool. So there'll be some people listening to this that are either maybe would benefit from being a member of Travelzoo as I guess a club member. Is that what you call them?
Yeah, club member, exactly.
But I suspect we also have some people listening to this that have some pretty cool operations that they're working on, a lot of tour operators and stuff like that maybe in the past would think, we're a small operator, we do this, we do that, and they may not have thought that something like Travelzoo made sense. But if you listen to this conversation and you heard Dana speaking, if you feel a connection and a resonation at all, I would encourage you to reach out to them. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to get in touch with you, but we're going to have a link to Travelzoo right in the website. A link to the website right in the show notes. Very cool. Dana, it was a fun conversation. I knew it would be, and I appreciate you taking time to do it, and look forward to collaborating with you on some stuff in the future.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jason. It's been a blast. It's been great to connect with you both here and in our previous conversation. It's always fun seeing where you're beaming in from for the different episodes. I wish you a great time in Mexico.
Thank you so much, Dana. I'll chat with you real soon. We'll stay connected. All right,
take care.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.